The night was still, except for the whisper of the wind brushing across the plains. A campfire burned low, its glow trembling in the darkness. She sat on the far side of the flames, her knees drawn close to her chest, as though she could fold, herself small enough to disappear. Shadows played across her face, hiding the weariness etched into her eyes. He sat opposite her, a silent figure with the patience of stone. His broad shoulders were at ease, but his eyes, those betrayed him. He had mastered the art of silence long ago, trained to keep his thoughts buried deep where no one could read them. But tonight, under the fragile hush of firelight, his control wavered. She noticed. Her breath caught when she saw the way his gaze lingered, not in pity, not in judgment, but in a quiet reverence that unsettled her more than scorn ever could. It was a look she remembered from another lifetime, when love was still something she dared to believe in, and she couldn't bear it. Please. Her voice cracked, little more than a whisper. She turned her face away, unable to meet the tenderness in his eyes. Don't look at me like that. The words hung in the air like smoke, fragile yet heavy. He blinked, caught between instinct and restraint. His chest tightened, the firelight reflecting in his eyes, making them softer, warmer than he intended. He should have looked away. He should have shielded his feelings like he always did. But her plea only made his heart ache more deeply. Like what? His voice was low, controlled, but even he could hear the fracture in it. She swallowed hard. Like I'm something more than I am. Like you see someone worth saving. I'm not. I don't deserve that. Her words cut sharper than any blade. He wanted to protest, to reach across the fire and shake away the lies she had wrapped around herself. But he held still, his fists tightening in the dirt, his jaw clenching against the flood of emotions pressing to be spoken. He had carried battles on his back, scars on his skin, and silence in his soul. Yet nothing had ever weighed heavier than this, watching her tear herself down while he burned with the truth he couldn't hide, that she was worth everything. His gaze betrayed him again, softer now, almost breaking. She saw it and flinched, burying her face in her hands. Don't, she whispered, trembling. You don't know what I've done, what I've been through. You don't know how ugly it gets inside my heart. Don't waste that look on me. For a long moment, he said nothing. The fire snapped between them, sparks drifting upward like unsent prayers. Finally, he exhaled, slow and heavy. You think I don't see? His voice was steady, but deep beneath it lay something raw. I've seen darkness. I've lived in it. You're not ruined. You're still here. That means something. She shook her head, refusing to let the words reach her. But a tiny tremor in her chest betrayed the crack forming in her walls. He didn't push, not yet. But his eyes, those stubborn, unrelenting eyes, remained fixed on her, carrying the weight of a truth she wasn't ready to hold. And though she begged him not to, he lost the battle to hide his heart. The fire burned low. The silence between them grew thick, alive with all the words unsaid. For the first time in years, she was afraid. Not of the world outside, but of the possibility that someone might truly see her and love her anyway. Morning broke quietly, with the faint gold of the sun creeping across the horizon. The fire had burned down to ash, and the night's raw confessions still hung between them like smoke. She busied herself with meaningless tasks, gathering her shawl, brushing the dust from her dress, pretending not to feel the heaviness that lingered in the air. He stood a short distance away, his back to her, scanning the horizon as though danger might come riding out of the dawn. In truth, the only danger was the truth inside his chest. Every time he looked at her, his restraint frayed a little more. She knew it too. Her steps were sharp, hurried, as she passed by him without meeting his eyes. We should keep moving. The desert won't wait for us. He nodded silently, falling into step beside her. They walked without words, the crunch of sand beneath their boots the only sound. But silence had weight, and today it pressed down, heavier than ever. She hated it. Finally, she stopped abruptly and turned toward him, her voice rising. "Why do you do that?" He frowned, genuinely puzzled. "Do what?" "Stay so quiet," she snapped. Her hands trembled as she balled them into fists. "I can feel it. Your thoughts, your eyes, your everything. But you never say anything. Do you think that makes it easier for me? That your silence doesn't scream louder than words?" Her chest rose and fell sharply. She hadn't meant to let the storm inside her loose, but it was too late. He stared at her for a long time, his jaw tightening. "If I spoke," he said slowly, "you'd run from me." Her throat went dry. She wanted to deny it, but her silence betrayed her. "I see the way you flinch when I look at you," he continued, his voice low but steady. "You think my eyes are chains. You think love is another prison. But you're wrong. I don't want to own you. I don't want to break you. He trailed off, unable to finish, his chest heaving with the weight of what he couldn't say. Her lips parted, trembling, but no words came. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him not to care, not to hope. But instead she whispered, "You don't understand. I don't know how to be loved anymore. Not the right way." He stepped closer, not touching her, only standing near enough that she could feel his presence like a shield. His eyes searched hers with a quiet intensity. "Love doesn't need lessons," he murmured. "It only needs truth." Her breath caught, her heart racing against the walls she had built so carefully. She wanted to turn away, but she couldn't. His eyes held her there, refusing to let her disappear into her fears. Tears threatened to spill, but she blinked them back, shaking her head. "You'll regret this. You'll regret me." For the first time, a faint smile tugged at his lips. Sad, stubborn, unshakable. "I've survived wars, loss and darkness. You think I can't survive loving you?" Her knees weakened. She turned from him quickly, afraid he would see how her soul cracked under his words. She walked ahead, her steps unsteady, her chest tight. Behind her, he followed in silence. Not pressing, not demanding. Just there. A shadow, a guardian, a heart refusing to be hidden. And though she told herself she was running from his gaze, the truth echoed louder. Part of her was terrified because she no longer wanted to. The sun rose higher, and the desert began to reveal its cruelty. The heat pressed down like a weight, and the endless horizon stretched without mercy. By midday the air shimmered, and every step became heavier than the last. She wiped the sweat from her brow, her lips dry and cracked. "We need shade," she muttered, scanning the barren land. But there was none. Only rock, dust, and sky. He noticed the falter in her steps, the way she stumbled slightly before catching herself. His instincts screamed to help her, but he held back, knowing she hated to feel weak. Still, when her knees buckled a second time, he was there before she could fall. "Don't," she whispered hoarsely, trying to pull away. "I can walk." "You'll collapse," he said firmly, steadying her with one arm, "and I won't watch you break." His touch was steady, grounding, but it made her heart pound in ways she wasn't ready to admit. She wanted to shove him away, to prove she needed no one. Yet part of her, the part she tried so hard to silence, longed to lean into his strength. They pressed on until they found a cluster of boulders that offered a sliver of shade. He guided her down gently, then dropped his pack and rummaged inside. From his canteen, he poured a little water into her hands. "Drink," he ordered. She shook her head stubbornly. "You need it more." His jaw tightened. "Don't argue. With me." For a moment, their eyes clashed, hers defiant, his unyielding. Then, slowly, she lifted the canteen to her lips. The water was warm, but it felt like life flowing back into her veins. When she lowered it, she caught him watching her again. That same look, the one she dreaded, the one she secretly craved. Please. Her voice cracked, softer this time, almost pleading. Don't look at me like that, not now. His expression didn't change. I can't help it. She froze. The blunt honesty in his words cut through her defenses. No excuses, no masks, just raw truth. It terrified her. Before she could respond, a sharp sound pierced the silence, the distant echo of horses. He tensed immediately, every muscle alert. She followed his gaze and spotted dust rising on the horizon. Riders. Her pulse quickened. Do you think they're— Yes, he cut in, his voice grim. Hunters. Raiders. He helped her to her feet, eyes scanning their surroundings. The rocks offered some cover, but not much. They couldn't outrun mounted men across open desert. Her fear spiked. What do we do? His hand brushed the hilt of his knife, calm despite the danger. We survive. The riders drew closer, their shouts carried on the wind. She clutched his arm instinctively, her body trembling. He glanced down, meeting her eyes, and for a heartbeat, the world went silent. You stay behind me, he said firmly. No matter what. She wanted to argue, to insist she wasn't helpless, but the resolve in his tone silenced her. She nodded, her fingers curling into his sleeve. As the raiders closed in, he stepped forward, shoulders squared, eyes blazing with the fire of a man who had already made his choice. He would fight, not just for his life, but for hers, and as she watched him, something shifted inside her. For the first time, she didn't see pity or desire in his gaze. She saw devotion, unshakable, fierce. It scared her more than the riders, because deep down, she realized she didn't want to lose it. The riders thundered closer, a storm of dust and steel. She clutched at the rock behind her, heart racing as the sound of hooves shook the ground. He stood in front of her like a wall, broad shoulders squared, knife glinting in the harsh sunlight. The raiders were 4 in number, lean, hard men with cruel smiles. They reined in their horses a few yards away, circling like vultures who had already tasted the kill. One dismounted, swaggering forward with a sneer. Well, well, the man drawled, eyes sliding over her like poison. What do we have here? A pretty bird lost in the desert, and her guard dog. Her blood ran cold, but his stance never wavered. He said nothing, his silence more threatening than words. The raider chuckled, spitting into the dust. Move aside, warrior. We'll take the girl and let you keep your skin. Be smart. He finally spoke, his voice low, deadly calm. You'll touch her only over my body. The words struck her like a blade, fierce, final. He wasn't bluffing. The raiders exchanged looks, then laughed harshly. Then over your body it is. Steel flashed as they drew their weapons. It happened fast, too fast for her to process. The first lunged, and he met the attack head-on, catching the man's wrist and driving his blade deep into his chest. The raider crumpled with a choking gasp. Another charged, slashing wildly. He moved with practiced precision, blocking the strike and spinning to drive his knife across the man's throat. Blood sprayed, and the second raider fell lifeless in the sand. The last 2 dismounted, circling him together. She pressed back against the rock, her breath shallow, terror clawing at her throat. He was outnumbered, but not outmatched. Yet every movement carried the weight of risk. One raider swung heavy, and he barely dodged, the blade grazing his arm. She gasped as blood blossomed on his sleeve, but his focus never faltered. With a growl, he seized the man's momentum, pulling him close and driving his knife upward into his ribs. The 4th raider roared and attacked from behind. She screamed his name. But he spun just in time, catching the blade with his own, the clash of steel echoing through the canyon of silence around them. The fight was brutal, raw, dust swirling, blades flashing. At last, with a final surge, he twisted his opponent's arm and plunged his knife into the man's chest. The raider dropped, choking, then stilled, and then it was over. The desert fell quiet again, broken only by the harsh rasp of his breathing. Blood stained his arm, his chest heaving with exhaustion. Around him lay the bodies of the fallen, dust settling on their lifeless forms. She stared, trembling, tears streaming down her face. Not from fear of him, but from the truth, his actions. Screamed louder than words. He hadn't fought for glory. He hadn't fought for himself. He had fought for her. Slowly she stepped forward, her hands shaking as she reached for him. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he said quickly, brushing it off. But when her fingers brushed his wounded arm, he flinched. "Don't," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't pretend this means nothing. You nearly died for me." He met her eyes, and for once he didn't try to hide. His gaze was raw, stripped bare, carrying all the weight he had tried to bury. "I told you," he said quietly, his voice hoarse from the fight. "I'd rather bleed than see you broken." Her breath caught, her chest tightening. She wanted to run, to hide, to deny. But the truth burned in his eyes, undeniable, unstoppable. And for the first time, she realized she feared not his love, but how much she wanted to believe in it. The battlefield was quiet now. Only the buzz of flies beginning to gather reminded her that death had passed through. She knelt in the sand beside him, her hands trembling as she pulled at his sleeve to expose the wound on his arm. He tried to pull away. "It's nothing." Her eyes flashed, sharp despite the tears staining her cheeks. "Don't you dare tell me it's nothing. You bled for me. You almost died for me." His jaw tightened, but he didn't resist when she tore a strip from her own shawl and pressed it against the gash. He hissed through his teeth, the pain flaring, but her hands remained steady, firm in their task. For a long time, neither spoke. The silence was thick, heavy with all the words they had been too afraid to say. Finally she broke it, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why?" He glanced at her. "Why what? Why would you risk your life like that? You could have walked away. You could have let them take me." His eyes darkened, and he leaned closer, his voice quiet but fierce. "Because I'd rather die than see them lay a hand on you." Her breath caught. The truth in his tone left no room for doubt. She looked away quickly, focusing on the makeshift bandage, afraid that if she met his gaze too long, her walls would crumble completely. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I'm not someone worth saving. I've been broken too many times. There's nothing left in me worth dying for." He reached out then, gently, his calloused fingers brushing her wrist. The touch was light, reverent, as though he feared she might shatter at the slightest pressure. "You're wrong," he said softly. "I see more in you than you'll ever see in yourself." Her throat tightened. She wanted to push his hand away, to insist that he was blinded by pity, by some misplaced sense of duty, but the sincerity in his eyes made the words die in her mouth. Instead, she whispered, "Please, don't look at me like that." But he did. He couldn't help it. His gaze was steady, burning with the weight of a truth too powerful to be hidden. Her fingers faltered against his wound, and for a moment their hands overlapped. She felt the warmth of him, the strength, the steady rhythm of his pulse under her touch. It terrified her. "You'll regret this," she murmured, her voice breaking. "You'll regret loving me. I'll only drag you down." A faint, weary smile curved his lips, though his eyes were fierce. "If love is a weight, then it's the only one I'll gladly carry." The words struck her deeper than any blade. Her chest ached, her breath uneven, and for the first time she couldn't summon the strength to argue. She simply bowed her head, her forehead resting lightly against his shoulder. For a long time they stayed like that. Two souls in silence, bound not by words, but by the quiet recognition of something neither could deny anymore. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the sand. He winced as he shifted, and she quickly steadied him, helping him lean back against the rocks. "Rest," she said softly, though her own voice trembled. His gaze lingered on her one last time before his eyes closed, exhaustion finally claiming him. She sat beside him, her heart torn. She told herself she couldn't let his love in, that it was too dangerous, too painful. Yet as she watched him sleep, her hand unconsciously drifted to his, holding it with a tenderness she couldn't explain. And though she whispered to herself that it meant nothing, deep inside, she knew it meant everything. The desert night crept in quietly, wrapping them in cool air after the heat of the day. Stars spilled across the sky, sharp and endless, as though the heavens themselves were listening. The small fire she had built crackled faintly, its glow pushing back the shadows, but not the silence. He lay propped against the rocks, his wounded arm bound tight in the cloth she had wrapped. His face was pale with exhaustion, yet his eyes remained steady, following her every movement as she tended the fire, checked the packs, anything to keep her hands busy. She could feel his gaze, heavy as the stars. It made her restless. Finally, she snapped without looking at him. "You should sleep." "I can't," he answered softly. She stilled, staring at the fire. "You're hurt. You need rest." He exhaled slowly. "It's not the wound keeping me awake." Her throat tightened. She didn't want to ask, but the silence stretched until the question slipped out anyway. "Then what is?" He shifted slightly, his gaze never leaving her. "You." The word hit her like a blow. She turned sharply, her heart pounding. "Don't, but—" He didn't stop. "Every time I close my eyes, I see you. Not as you think you are, broken, ruined, but as you are. Strong, fierce, more alive than you realize." Her chest ached, and she shook her head. "Stop saying things like that. You don't know me, I do." His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made her breath falter. "I've watched you fight the world, fight yourself, and still keep walking. That's not weakness. That's strength I've never seen in anyone else." Her eyes stung, tears burning at the edges. She hugged her knees to her chest, hiding her face in the shadows. "You don't understand. I don't know how to let someone love me. I don't know how to believe it won't destroy me again." He leaned forward slightly, his injured arm trembling but steady enough. His voice softened, low and sure. "Love doesn't destroy, people do, and I'm not here to break you. I'm here to stay." The words cracked something inside her. She bit her lip hard, trying to hold back the sob threatening to escape. But then his hand, strong, calloused, warm, rested gently over hers, not gripping, not forcing, just there. Her defenses wavered. She whispered, trembling, "You'll lose yourself in me. I'll ruin you." He shook his head. "Then let me be ruined, if that's what it takes." The fire popped, sending sparks into the dark. She finally lifted her gaze to meet his, and what she saw there nearly undid her completely. His eyes weren't wild with desire, nor heavy with pity. They were steady, unwavering, full of something she had run from all her life. Truth. Her lips parted, words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Why me?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because my heart chose you, long before you ever knew." Her breath caught, and for a long, trembling moment, neither moved. The world outside disappeared, leaving only the firelight, the stars, and the weight of what hung between them. At last, She broke the spell, pulling her hand away, clutching it to her chest as though it burned. "I can't," she whispered, shaking her head. "Not yet. I'm not ready." He didn't argue. He didn't press. He only leaned back against the rock, his expression calm despite the ache in his eyes. "Then I'll wait." Her heart clenched. No anger, no demand, just patience. It was the one thing she hadn't expected, and it terrified her more than any blade or raider ever could, because patience meant he wasn't going to let her run forever, and for the first time, a part of her didn't want to. The desert had a way of turning on you. By morning, the sky had shifted, dark clouds gathering like an army. A wind swept across the sand, sharp and biting, carrying with it the warning of a storm. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, glancing nervously at the horizon. "We need shelter." He studied the sky, his brow furrowing. His injured arm hung heavy at his side, though he refused to let it slow him. "There are caves east of here. If we move fast, we can make it before the storm breaks." They set out, the wind growing stronger with every step. Sand lashed against their faces, stinging their skin. She stumbled once, twice, but he caught her each time, steadying her without a word. His touch was brief, careful, but enough to keep her moving. By the time they reached the mouth of a cave carved into the side of a rocky ridge, the storm had begun to howl. They ducked inside, the air damp and cool, the roar of wind outside like the growl of some furious beast. She collapsed against the wall, her chest heaving. "We made it." He nodded, lowering himself carefully beside her. His face was pale, sweat slick on his brow. She frowned, noticing the dark stain spreading through the bandage on his arm. "You've reopened it," she whispered, panic flaring. "It's fine," he muttered, but his voice was weaker than before. Without hesitation, she knelt beside him, tugging at the cloth. Blood welled up, fresh and angry. She pressed her hands firmly over the wound, ignoring his hiss of pain. "You'll bleed out if we don't stop this." He tried to brush her off, but she snapped, her voice sharp. "Don't you dare act like your life doesn't matter. Not after everything you've done to keep me alive." His eyes widened slightly at her tone. For once, she wasn't pushing him away. She was fighting for him. She worked quickly, tearing more fabric from her dress to bind the wound tighter. Her fingers trembled, but her jaw was set with determination. He watched her, his lips parting as though to speak, but he said nothing. When she finally finished, her hands fell to her lap, shaking. She didn't meet his gaze, her voice low and raw. "I can't lose you. Not after." She stopped, biting back the words. "Not after what?" he asked gently. She shook her head, tears threatening. "Not after you've made me start believing." Again. Believing in something I told myself was dead. His breath caught, his eyes softening. Slowly, he reached out with his good hand, lifting her chin so she would look at him. "You don't have to be afraid of that. Not with me." Her heart hammered in her chest. The storm outside raged, howling against the stone, but inside the cave, the silence between them was louder. "I'm still broken," she whispered. "Then let me hold the pieces," he replied simply. Her lips trembled, her body torn between fear and longing. She wanted to surrender, to fall into the safety of his arms, but the scars inside her screamed warnings. Instead, she leaned forward just enough that her forehead brushed against his. It wasn't surrender, not yet, but it was the closest she had ever allowed herself. He closed his eyes, his breath mingling with hers, and for a moment, the storm outside didn't matter. The only storm that existed was the one raging between their hearts. The storm raged through the night, but by dawn, it was gone, leaving the desert strangely quiet. The cave still smelled of damp earth, and the air was heavy with silence. She stirred first, blinking against the soft light spilling in from the entrance. He was slumped against the wall, his head tilted, his skin pale. For one heart-stopping moment, she thought he was gone. "No," she whispered, scrambling to his side. Her hands pressed against his chest until she felt the faint rise and fall of his breathing. Relief broke through her like a wave, but fear followed quickly after. His wound had bled again in the night, the bandage dark and wet. Her throat tightened. She tore another strip from her dress, rewrapping the wound as best she could. Each time, she touched him. She whispered words she hadn't meant to speak aloud. "Don't you dare leave me. Not now. Not when I finally—" Her voice cracked, the last word dying in her throat. A groan escaped his lips, his eyes fluttering open. "Still here," he muttered weakly. She let out a shaky laugh, half sob, half relief. "You scared me." He managed a faint smile. "You'd miss me then?" Her lips trembled. For once she didn't fight the truth. "Yes. More than I can stand." He studied her face, his gaze soft despite the pain. "Then don't push me away anymore." Before she could respond, a sound echoed outside the cave. Hooves, faint but approaching. Her blood ran cold. Raiders, or worse, bounty hunters? He tried to rise, but she pressed him back firmly. "No, you can't fight like this." His jaw clenched. "If they come in, I'll handle it," she cut in, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. He looked at her, searching her eyes, then nodded reluctantly. "Stay low. If they see fear, they'll tear you apart. Stand like you belong." Her pulse thundered in her ears, but she nodded. She moved to the cave's entrance, pressing herself against the rock. The riders came into view, 2 men, armed, scanning the landscape. One dismounted, heading toward the cave. Her breath quickened, but she straightened her back, stepping into view before he could. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of her, alone, standing tall. "This land isn't safe," the man said, his gaze sliding past her. "You traveling alone, girl?" Her heart pounded, but she forced her voice steady. "No. And if you value your life, you'll ride on." The man chuckled darkly. "Brave words. Who's protecting you? That half-dead man bleeding inside?" Her blood boiled at the insult, and before she could think, she stepped forward, her eyes fierce. "He's worth 10 of you, and if you try to test it, you won't live to regret it." The rider studied her, clearly amused by her fire. But something, in her stance, her defiance, her unflinching glare, made him hesitate. After a long moment, he spat into the dirt and swung back onto his horse. "Not worth the trouble," he muttered to his companion. The 2 rode off, dust rising behind them until the horizon swallowed them whole. Her legs buckled as soon as they were gone. She stumbled back into the cave, her hands trembling. He looked up at her, pride flickering in his tired eyes. "You stood like fire," he whispered. She knelt beside him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I thought I'd lose you, and I couldn't bear it." For once she didn't resist. She took his hand in both of hers, clutching it tightly, as though holding on could keep him tethered to life, to her. And in that moment, she realized the goal. Truth she had been running from. It wasn't his love she feared. It was her own. The desert stretched endlessly when they left the cave, its silence broken only by the sound of their footsteps. He leaned heavily on her for support, his body weakened, but his spirit stubbornly alive. She kept her arm around him, steadying his. Wait, her jaw set with determination. For hours they walked, speaking little. Yet silence no longer felt like a wall between them. It was filled with unspoken things, shared glances, quiet breaths, the rhythm of their steps together. At last, as twilight painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, they stopped near a shallow ravine where water shimmered faintly. She eased him down against a rock, kneeling to check his bandage again. "You should rest," she said softly. He caught her wrist, stopping her movements. His eyes held hers, steady and unwavering despite the exhaustion etched into his face. "You keep saving me," he whispered. "You've saved me more times than I can count," she replied, her throat tight. "Not just from danger," he said. His voice was raw, as if each word carried more weight than his body could bear. "From yourself, from the walls you built." Her lips parted, but no words came. He was right. For so long, she had lived like a ghost, hollow and untouchable. But with him, each glance, each fight for survival, each moment where he refused to give up, she had begun to feel alive again. Tears burned her eyes. She tried to look away, but his hand cupped her cheek, forcing her gaze back to his. "Please, don't look at me like that," she whispered, the same plea she had spoken before. He smiled faintly, shaking his head. "I can't stop, because it's the only way I know how to see you. With my heart bare." Her chest ached, as though something inside her had finally broken free. The tears spilled, hot and unstoppable. "I don't know how to love like that. I don't know if I can. You already do," he said gently. "Every time you fight for me, every time you hold me when you think I won't notice, every time you let me see you." Her hands trembled against his chest, her sob catching in her throat. She wanted to deny it, to cling to the safety of her old defenses. But the truth had already taken root. She leaned forward, her forehead resting against his. "I'm so afraid." "So am I," he murmured. "But I'd rather walk into fear with you than face peace without you." The words undid her. With a broken cry, she pressed her lips to his, hesitant at first, then fierce, pouring all the longing and fear and hope she had buried. He kissed her back, weak but certain, as though this was the only battle he had ever truly wanted to win. When they broke apart, breathless, she whispered the words that had haunted her for days. "I love you." His eyes closed, relief washing over his face. "Then that's enough." But even as the warmth of their confession wrapped around them, reality struck. The faint sound of horses carried on the wind again, closer this time. She stiffened, panic flashing across her face. "They're coming back," she whispered. His jaw tightened. He tried to push himself upright, wincing. "If they find us here, it won't matter what we feel. We won't live to keep it." She swallowed hard, her heart racing. The sweetness of their confession collided with the cruel reminder that love in the desert came with no guarantees. And as the riders' shadows stretched closer across the sand, she realized their bond wasn't just about trust or survival anymore. It was about the choice they would have to make, to fight, to flee, or to sacrifice everything for each other. The sound of hooves thundered closer, rolling across the desert like an approaching storm. Dust rose on the horizon, and she felt her pulse race in time with it. The raiders were back, and this time they weren't passing by. He struggled to his feet, grimacing as his wound tore anew. She grabbed his arm, desperate. "You can't fight them like this." His gaze locked on hers, steady despite the pain. "I won't let them take you, even if it costs me everything." "No," she snapped, her voice breaking. "Not after you made me believe again. I won't lose you." To them, the riders came into view, 4 this time, circling like vultures. Their leader sneered as he dismounted, his boots crunching in the sand. "Well, well, looks like we caught a wounded wolf and his little bird." She stood tall, though her legs trembled. "Leave us," she said firmly, her voice sharper than she felt. The leader laughed, shaking his head. "Pretty, but foolish." He turned to his men. "Kill him. Bring her." The words ignited something primal in her chest. Fear twisted into fire, and before she could think, she grabbed the knife from her companion's belt. She held it out, her hands shaking but her eyes fierce. "You'll have to kill me first." The raiders froze, surprised by her defiance. The leader's grin faltered, replaced by a flicker of caution. Behind her, he whispered hoarsely, "Don't." "You don't have to." "Yes," she cut in, her voice trembling but resolute. "I do. Because I love you, and I won't let them take me from you." The raiders advanced, steel flashing in the dying sun. Then, sudden, sharp, a shot cracked through the air. One of the riders fell from his horse, dead before he hit the ground. Everyone turned. On the ridge above, another figure stood, an old ally of his tribe, bow in hand, rifle slung across his back. Reinforcements. Chaos erupted. The raiders shouted, their formation breaking. He seized the moment, lunging with what strength remained, his blade catching the leader across the chest. She too lashed out with the knife, narrowly deflecting a strike meant for him. The fight was brutal and desperate. Dust and blood mingled in the air, the world shrinking to survival and love. By the time the last raider fell, silence returned, broken only by the ragged sound of their breathing. She dropped the knife, trembling, and turned to him. He was on one knee, clutching his side, his strength nearly gone. She knelt beside him, cradling his face with shaking hands. "Stay with me, please." His lips curved in the faintest smile. "You fought like fire, like you were born for it." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I fought because I couldn't bear to lose you." He leaned into her touch, his voice barely a whisper. "Then I'll live. For you." Above them, the sky deepened into twilight, painted with streaks of crimson and gold. The ally from the ridge descended, nodding silently before disappearing back into the desert, leaving them alone again. Two souls bound by survival, by scars, and now by love. She pressed her forehead against his, her tears wetting his skin. "You changed everything," she whispered, "and I'll never let go again." His arms, weak but certain, wrapped around her. "Neither will I." And as the desert night closed around them, there was no longer fear in her heart. Only trust. Only love.